Good morning. Good morning. And how the devil are we all doing this fine morning? I say fine morning, it's chucking it down outside my front door at the moment, so it's not that fine at all. Let's say good morning to Dan Cullen, first off the mark as usual. Saying, saying morning, Mark, morning, guys, morning, Mrs. Demi Lotion. Demi Lotion. Good morning, Dan. And he points out quite correctly, it will soon be Friday. Yes, another 24 hours, and we'll be at the end of the week. Chris Ford is here as well. Good morning and greetings on this wonderful day. What's wonderful about it? Have you got weather that I haven't got? Or have you won the pools or something? Our friend Mick is here as well. Morning, Mick. Had a chat with Mick online last night. We'll be coming to the reason for that in just a moment. Jim Turner's just joined us as well. Morning, Jim. Morning to everybody over on Instagram. I haven't typed your welcome message over there as yet. I'll do that in just a moment. I want to give you a very quick heads up. Today's, well, the main part of the show will be the usual stuff and nonsense, but after the show we're going to get a bit more serious. Today's morning monologue is mostly about the investigation into the Grenfell Tower tragedy, the results of which obviously were published yesterday. However, it will also spill over to include further discussion about the Didcot investigation that remains ongoing, presumably a full 8.5 years later. I'd love for you to stick around for that and to voice your opinion as well. Alex Latham has just joined us. Morning, Alex. Thank you for being here. I am going to crack on with the show because I'm kind of caught betwixt and between. The after show chat is a bit longer than usual, but I also need to be elsewhere today. So I'm going to try and get through the main part first off, and then we'll get on with it. So let's head over to the intro, shall we? Just reads as a funny sentence. This Mick says, "Bloody dog, another monkey spent because of him. Oh well, he's dropped a monkey on his dog." For those of you that know, that's 500 quid to the uninitiated. Thank you very much indeed for that, Mick. That's put a smile on my face. It is Thursday, the 5th of September. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition. In today's show, we're going to get a sneak peek at the new Heracles compact wheel loader. Yes, Heracles. Heard of those? Be surprised if you have. We're also going to get another sneak peek, this time at the latest dozer from those fine folks at Shantway. A Pownal plant welcomes Takuchi, and we've got another satisfied Bobcat customer to bring you as well. Plus, as I've already alluded to, in today's longer than usual edition of Mark's Morning Monologue, I will of course be discussing the Grenfell Tower tragedy following the publication of the findings of a 7-year investigation, but also be extending that discussion to draw comparisons with the Didcot investigation that remains ongoing a full 8 years, 6 months and 14 days after the tragedy unfolded up at Didcot. Before we get to all of that, I do want to bother you slightly with the small matter of today's mystery machine, which looks, well, I'll show you after this. Yeah, now, today's mystery machine, I'll show it to you in just a second, but here's the conundrum you need to solve. Is this a machine, a well-known machine that's in a funny colour? Or is it a machine that you possibly don't know that is in its normal colour? That's what you need to figure out. Obviously, we're looking for the usual thing. We need make, model, machine. That is the machine that you're after. Make of that what you will. We've got plenty more of those to show you, so keep the guesses coming in. While you're figuring that out, I'm going to play this for you. Yeah, from here on in, all the matches in the Excavator World Cup are big because there is a place in the semi-finals at stake. We've already seen Volvo take their place in the Final Four, but who will join them? Today's match, don't come much bigger than this. Today's match sees Hydromek taking on Kobelco. The manufacturer of the most votes will go forward to the next round, while the manufacturer of the least will fall at the, not quite the last, but they'll fall by the wayside. So, usual thing. I've given you 150 imaginary pounds. You need to invest it in an excavator. Are you going Kobelco or are you going Hydromek? While you're doing that, I'm going to put this one back up. There's your mystery machine. Chris Ford says the mystery machine is about as big as an ant on this phone. I'll show you a bit more in a second. Mick has already thrown his weight behind Kobelco, so it's 1-0 to Kobelco, 2-0 to Kobelco as it stands at the moment. Ken Hatter is here. Brolly's up because he's got Welsh weather, and he's also made it 3-0. That's a pretty good start for the fine folks at Kobelco. There's your mystery machine. I'm going to show you a bit more because, you know, I'm feeling generous. That's what you're looking at. Earl Fallon just joined us over on Instagram. Earl, I think you should come on the show one of these days. You're in the audience on a regular basis. Pop on, let's have a chat. Dan Cullen says, "Is it a mini digger? Could be something completely different. I mean, it isn't, but it could be. Keep the guesses coming in, and don't forget to vote in our mystery machine, not our mystery machine, in our Excavator World Cup. As it stands at the moment, Kobelco are absolutely storming away with this one. But if there's any Hydromek fans out there, make your presence felt. If you're a Kobelco fan, make that presence felt as well. Take that away because it is time to crack on with a little bit of this. I'm going to say a very quick good morning to Mark Whiting, who just joined us. Morning, Mark. I'll bring you up to speed. There you are. Our Excavator World Cup today is Hydromek versus Kobelco. Make your presence felt in that. And that is what our mystery machine, rather, looks like today. Dan Cullen reckons it could be an Onyx 1-ton mini excavator. It is not one of those, but that's what you're working with. I'm going to say good morning to our friends over at Joe Brown Construction, all the way over in the United States of America, which is where I'll be in roughly 18 days' time. Not your part of the world, Joe Brown Construction. I'll actually be in Las Vegas, but you get the idea. Mick says, Joe, the first thing I've watched on this new laptop, got to say, I was so used to my old laptop, I feel like I'm at the cinema. Wow. I don't know if anybody can see it. Over here, I've got there's a pink light in the, pinky purpley in the corner of the room now. Just putting a bit of a wash on the wall. I don't know if you can see that. It looks lovely in here. It really does. I can't show it to you because camera, but it does really look smart. I don't know if it's making any difference to your viewing experience, but I hope you're enjoying it. Anyway, yes, Dan Cullen, I think it was Dan Cullen, said the other day, he was astonished that we're still discovering new Chinese companies that we've never heard of before. And I think I found another one. I haven't actually done too much of a check, but I'm pretty sure that Heracles is also Chinese. And this is a preview of one of their new compact wheel loaders. Dan Cullen says, looks nice. Nice little bit of kit. Love the tune. Good. Glad to hear it. I did check while you were watching that. Apparently, Heracles is one of the many brands of Shandong. So my guess that it was Chinese was absolutely on the money. I'm going to go back to the mystery machine, and I've got a guess from Ken Hatcher, who reckons it could be a Eurocomac Mini. It is not one of those. Mick with a further update on his brand spanking new laptop. Got to say, this electric one is far better and faster than my Steam one. Imagine shuffling coal into your laptop. Dan reckons our mystery machine could be a Hitachi 55U. It is not one of those. He also reckons it could be a Hitachi ZX35U. I can tell you now, it's not a Hitachi of any description. So keep the guesses coming. I tell you what, I'll show you a smidge more. There you are. I mean, I think you've all figured out by now exactly what type of machine it is. What I'm looking for is a make and a model, if you would be so kind. Chris Ford, end of shift now, on to shift 2. No rest for the wicked. Yes, I've often wondered that. Was I a mass murderer in a previous life? Because how else would you explain some of the pitfalls that have befallen me in my life? Yeah. Just say, I'm going to take that away. Don't forget to vote in our mystery machine, in our Excavator World Cup. As it stands at the moment, Kobelco is going to absolutely storm into the semi-finals alongside Volvo. But if anybody's got any more to say on that subject, please let us. Well, speak now or forever hold your peace, as they say in church, apparently.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, we've just had one Chinese sneak preview. Let's have another one. Only this time we're going to go a bit bigger. We're going dozers, and we're going with Shantwei. Pretty smart. These Chinese brands are looking very, very good, people. Now let me go back to the mystery machine. I can tell you before we go any further, Kobelco are absolutely storming away with today's Excavator World Cup. So it looks like they're going to be going into the semi-finals. Dan Cullen's also put his weight behind them. But in the mystery machine, Chris Ford reckons it could be a Kubota E85. It is not. I'll tell you now, it's not an E85 and it's not a Bobcat of any description. Dan Cullen says it could be a Kubota KX057. It is not. It, in fact, is not any type of Kubota. Mick says that loader was on full lock to the left but still going in a straight line. It was an it was an animation, Mick, and I have to say I noticed it. I didn't notice it when I was uploading it, but I noticed it when I was watching it. Well, that's disconcerting. It was like it was drifting somehow. Yeah, bizarre. Now, we need to press on, don't we? I'm going to take that away. I am rattling through these today. I do apologise, but I do want to get to the morning monologue as well. So, bit of this. I have something of a soft spot for the fine folks at Takuchi. I think they make a damn good mini excavator. Apparently, I'm not alone in my love of the brand. Take a look.
Hi, I'm Matt from Pownall Fan. At the minute, we're on a natural flood management site on a children's home based in Rochdale. We run a Takuchi micro digger, which is a TB210R, as well as a Takuchi 3-tonner, which is a TB230. We run this 5-tonner that's behind me, which is a TB350R, as well as a 290 9-tonner. This machine behind me is one of the best machines we have on our fleet because it's just, when you get into it, it just feels simply like a car. It's really ergonomic to drive and just be inside of. and we've got it recently, and we had one on demo, and it was the best machine I've ever driven. The jog dial is a bit difficult to get the hang of originally, but then it gets really intuitive, like it gets better and better the more you actually understand it. When I think of Takuchi, the first thing I think of is reliability.
Yeah, reliability. I think that's one of the watchwords for the fine folks at Takuchi. Now, speaking of mini excavators, that is our mystery machine at the moment. And I can tell you that Dan Cullen has just guessed that it could be a Yanmar Vio 17. It isn't, but oh boy, are you close, my friend? Are you close? He's also gone for the Vio 33. Still close, still no cigar. Let me show you a bit more. I'll go even further than that. There you are. That's what you're looking at. Yanmar, possibly, but you're in the right area, Dan. Garvin over on Instagram has just said, sat in the new Model 350 at the show. Have to say, it felt really premium. Love any of the mini Takuchis I've been on. He's also guessed the Yanmar Vio 30. It is not a Vio 30 or a 17 or a 33, but keep the guesses coming in. And Garvin, while you're paying attention, how would you vote in that? Are you a Hedromic fan or are you a Kobelco fan? Oh, you're not a fan at all. Entirely up to you. I'm not going to force your arm. We're going to be back in just a moment with what I believe to be our final film of the day before we get onto the subject of all things related to Grenfell and Didcot and stuff.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
A very quick heads up, our final film of the day, which features Bobcat, is 2 minutes and 11 seconds long, which means that's how long you've got to identify our mystery machine of today. Latest offering from Dan Cullen was the Yanmar SV60. It is not one of those. There's a little bit more. I don't suppose that helps a great deal, but that's what you're looking at. 2 minutes and 11 seconds. Otherwise, I win. Hang on, somebody's just commented. No, it's not one of those either, Dan. Sorry. Just making sure I was checking my notes. It's not an SV19 VT either. 2 minutes, 11 seconds to discern exactly what that machine is.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Kamil. I'm Senior Project Manager working with General Mechanic Company. We are main contractor for infrastructure works in UAE, Sharjah, Emirates. We do mainly tunneling as well as mountain works. We are here since 1998. These machines we're using for all surfacing works like utilities, trench works, and also transporting material within the site is very useful. Performance is very good. It's very flexible machines, and all kind of jobs can be done by this.
Hi, my name is Said Ishaq. I'm working with Kanu Machinery. We are dealers for Bobcat. Bobcat skid steers, backhoe loaders, telehandlers, whole range of Bobcat products. I'm working with Kanu for past 11 years, and I'm looking after the Dubai region, looking after the construction segment in Dubai. We are here in the construction site of General Mechanic. We have sold them this Bobcat B730 2 years back, and the customer is very happy with the performance of the machine. The machine is powered with a 100 HP Perkins engine, and it comes with a multi-purpose bucket, 6-in-1 bucket, doing the multi-activities in the site. You can see the cabin, it's most spacious cabin. It increases the productivity because the controls inside the cabin are easily placed. So hence, the activity what the customer requires to do in the job site activities increases with this machine. We have an extended boom, which helps in digging. The extended boom goes up to 5.8 meters, and this helps a great deal with the customer. The customer was using a different product earlier, and we managed to sell them our Bobcat backhoe loader, And since then, he is very happy with the productivity of the machine, and he has assured us that he'll have more units for their projects in this area. And he's very happy with the result of the machine.
We have winners, multiple winners. I can tell you, Garvin over at Mostly Diggers on Instagram says, I've heard so many good things about Hydromec, but I have to go with Kobelco. Going by knowing some long-term returning buyers of Kobelco. Reliability and good fuel consumption seem common remarks. It's been a whitewash. I'll tell you all about that in just a moment, but I also need to resolve this. Lots and lots and lots of guesses, mainly by Dan Cullen, going for a bit of a clean sweep because he won yesterday as well. He went through lots and lots of different machines, but he ultimately landed on this one, a Yanmar Vio 27-6. On the money. There you are in all its glory. It is indeed a Yanmar Vio 027-6. Dan Cullen, I've already put your points on the board. You have got yourself another win, and I can tell you, there you are. Kobelco are another vote there. So good stuff. On that basis, I'm going to announce today's winner. The latest round of the Excavator World Cup competition pitted Hydromec against Kobelco, but which brand came out on top? We put it to the public vote, and I can tell you that the winner, resoundingly, is Kobelco. Kobelco goes forward to the next round, while Hydromec sadly leaves us empty-handed. Tomorrow's match could quite easily have been the grand final, as it will see Caterpillar going head-to-head with their arch-rival Komatsu. So make sure you tune in, take part, and possibly influence the outcome. Be interesting to see how that one pans out. I am going to roll the end of show stinger in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, then do please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Hope to see you again very soon. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back with my morning monologue immediately after... To the families of the 72 people that perished at Grenfell Tower on the night of the 14th of June 2017, the findings of the investigation revealed yesterday will have been of scant consolation. To the national and international media that have been following this story for more than 7 years, the investigation report laid out in black and white precisely how the tragedy had unfolded. But to those within the construction industry, the findings will have come as no surprise whatsoever. The inquiry, chaired by Sir Martin Moore-Bick, spent just over 7 years uncovering the truth, and what they found was a damning indictment of almost everyone involved in the refurbishment and maintenance of Grenfell Tower. The scathing report cited dishonesty, incompetence, and greed as contributory factors in the tragedy. The tower's refurbishment in 2015 was supposed to improve living conditions. Instead, it set the stage for catastrophe. The key to the disaster, as we have known all along, was cladding. Combustible panels that wrapped the building's exterior, intended to improve insulation and aesthetics. But those panels, made of aluminium with a polyethylene core, were highly flammable. They turned the tower into a giant torch, spreading flames in mere minutes and turning the building into a furnace. The inquiry revealed that the choice of these materials wasn't just a mistake. It was the result of deliberate actions by manufacturers, contractors, and regulators who put cost-cutting and profit above human lives. The American company Arconic, which supplied the cladding, was found to have deliberately concealed the dangers of its product. Celotex, which provided foam insulation, embarked on a dishonest scheme to mislead customers about the safety of its materials. And Kingspan cynically exploited the industry's lack of knowledge, relying on the fact that the market would trust their misleading claims. Of course, the blame doesn't stop with just these companies. The UK government, particularly the Department for Communities and Local Government, failed in its most basic duty to protect its citizens. The department ignored repeated warnings about the dangers of combustible cladding. They allowed unscrupulous manufacturers to manipulate testing processes and mislead the market, all in the name of reducing red tape and cutting costs. The regulatory failures were compounded by the local council, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, which was responsible for overseeing social housing. The council's indifference to fire safety, especially for vulnerable people, was blatant. Residents had raised concerns. I'm struggling a bit today. Residents had raised concerns about the safety of Grenfell Tower long before the fire, but their voices were dismissed. The Tenant Management Organisation, or TMO, which managed the building, regarded these residents as nuisances, militant troublemakers who were marginalised and ignored. The TMO's then chief executive, Robert Black, showed a stubborn reluctance to report fire safety issues to the council, further endangering the lives of those he was supposed to protect. In the aftermath of the fire, the government's response was nothing short of chaotic. The report described it as muddled, slow, indecisive, and piecemeal. Survivors and the bereaved were left feeling abandoned, with little respect for their dignity and humanity. It wasn't just the fire that caused pain. It was the systemic failure of the entire system that compounded the tragedy. Let's not forget, in just the past few weeks, there have been other fires on London buildings, one in Ealing, one in Dagenham, where the presence of cladding appears to have been a contributory factor. Grenfell Tower now stands as a grim reminder of what happens when greed, incompetence, and indifference intersect. It's a symbol of the deep social inequalities that persist in Britain today, where the lives of the most vulnerable are too often sacrificed upon the altar of cost-cutting and deregulation. It also serves as a reminder that in an industry that is constantly racing against the clock, the wheels of justice still turn slowly, too slowly. In fact, even as the findings of the report were being digested, the Metropolitan Police and the Crown Prosecution Service were busily managing expectations, saying that it was unlikely that any charges would be brought until the end of 2026, a full 9 years after the Grenfell tragedy unfolded. With all that in mind, we need to touch upon the presumably ongoing investigation into the Didcot disaster. At Grenfell, 72 people lost their lives in a tragedy that was televised live on air. Grenfell then became a bone of contention, a mantle that was taken up by the media and by politicians. There was a massive charity built up around the tragedy, and the name Grenfell has been on our TV screens almost daily since that fateful day in 2017. Now compare that with Didcot, which actually took place almost a year and a half before Grenfell. That incident took place behind closed doors. Aside from one lone politician putting her head above the parapet every year or so, Didcot has attracted no political attention. There's no charity, no media traction. In fact, it's as if Didcot never took place. It took more than 7 years of constant attention and unrelenting outrage to bring the Grenfell investigation to fruition. What hope is there for the families of the Didcot Four who have already been waiting for more than 8.5 years? The workers that perished there have been failed. Their families have been forgotten. Their treatment at the hands of big business and the investigating authorities has actually been worse than at Grenfell Tower. Excuse me. Regardless of the specific cause of the Didcot collapse and regardless of the circumstances in which those 4 men so tragically died, the Thames Valley Police and the Health and Safety Executive are complicit in prolonging the suffering of 4 grieving families. They've compounded a tragedy and turned it into a travesty. They should be held to account for their failings every bit as much as the authorities cited by the Grenfell inquiry. And based upon the comments from the Crown Prosecution Service over Grenfell, even if there is, let me do that again, based upon the comments from the Crown Prosecution Service, if there is a prosecution over Didcot, it could be more than 10 years after the tragedy that cost the lives of 4 demolition men. Just one final, only partly related point. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has said that his government will write to all companies found by the Grenfell inquiry to have been part of these horrific failings as a first step to stopping them being awarded government contracts. Should those same rules not have been applied to those found guilty in the CMA investigation? So that's my my feelings for the day. Let's have a look. Dan Cullen saying, no, Gary, today. No, I think he's probably on his way back. He's either on his way back or he's probably having a lay-in. I don't know. Lucan is here as well. Let's have a look. What's the story on Plant Works next year? I'll leave Lou to tell you all about that, because obviously it's going on. New location, new date as well. But I'll leave Lou to fill in the gaps on that. Mick says, over the years, I've seen so much going on in both demo and construction. The greed and blatant dishonesty is beyond belief. We all know the first thing that goes out of the door is safety when cost is involved. Yeah, it is. I just find myself utterly exasperated by both Grenfell and Didcot. Obviously, the tragedy should never, well, neither tragedy should ever have happened. But and this is a weird analogy to draw. Okay, so we all know that, for example, construction equipment goes wrong. Even if you take really, really good care of it, construction equipment does go wrong. That's just the nature of the beast. There are moving parts, and sometimes they fail, and sometimes the machine goes wrong. What separates the good from the great is the speed with which the manufacturer or your local dealer will get out and get you back up and running again. We don't seem to have that same thought process when it comes to accident investigations. There's been a tragic accident in the case of Grenfell where 72 people have died. There is no way to bring them back. There's no amount of compensation money that could be paid to the families to make that situation any better. However, is the onus not upon the investigating authorities, Crown Prosecution Service, Metropolitan Police, and everybody else that's involved to bring a speedy resolution to that? I mean, literally, 7.5, no, just over 7 years. Just over 7 years since that tragedy unfolded. It's taken that long to issue a report, and literally as that report was landing, the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police were already warning that any prosecutions, should there be any, are more than a year away. In fact, they're a best part of 18 months away. Listen, I understand the need to manage expectations and, not to expect anybody to be dragged through the courts next week, but really? And yet when you extend that to include, using that as a precedent, if that is the case, if a prosecution comes after 18 months, 2 years after the inquiry, bearing in mind we haven't had the results of the inquiry from Didcot, it could be a full 10 years or more until we know exactly what happened to those 4 guys at Didcot. It's I said the words. They've compounded the situation. The investigating authorities have compounded the situation, and they've turned 2 tragedies into 2 travesties. And I don't know how they can look themselves in the eye. And listen, Keir Starmer, like him or like with him, that doesn't matter. He's whatever it is, 6 weeks with his feet under the table. There was no way he was going to make any great difference to Grenfell. He's not going to make a great deal of difference to Didcot. But why is nobody asking the questions? Why, in addition to all of the, they've done an inquiry into who was responsible, who made the cladding, who made the foam insulation, who installed it. They've done all of that. But what about the 7 years it's taken to get to here? What about the 8.5 years it's taken to get Didcot to here? Didcot is just, there's nothing at all. We'll come February, I'm sure we'll get another statement from Thames Valley Police. Our thoughts with the families, and the investigation remains ongoing, and we're exploring possible corporate manslaughter charges. You said that at 5 years, and at 6, at 7, and at 8. Put up. Don't shut up, but put up. Get this thing resolved. It's an absolute disgrace. Let's have a look. Jim Turner says, I did mention the HSC shortcomings when I reshared their post the other day. Obviously, they've not said anything for themselves. The tractor post shows they have no shame about the way they work or don't work. Yeah. But ultimately, this is one of those who watches the Watchmen thing. Who polices the police? Who is the HSC answerable to? Why is that person, male or female, not on the chopping block right now for having dropped the ball so spectacularly. And whoever the commissioner of Thames Valley Police is right now, I can't remember the guy's name or the lady's name, but whoever that is, they have failed in their job. They have failed. No, we can pussyfoot around this all we like. We can use fancy language, but they have failed. They've failed the families. They've failed the 4 men that were killed at Didcot and the 72 that were killed at Grenfell. They are an absolute disgrace. They're not fit to hold the office that they hold. Mick says, I said in the email yesterday, no matter how many lives are lost, 4 or 72, how the hell does it take 7 years, and in the case of Didcot, 8.5 years to get to the bottom of it all? It shouldn't. It shouldn't. And it's a comparison. Every time we discuss Didcot, I end up having to tread down this line again. The Americans can do this in 18 months, start to finish. And this is not just a floaty, idealistic. The Americans had a boiler house collapse in Ohio, I don't know, maybe 2 years after Didcot, and the whole thing was investigated, prosecuted, case closed, less than 18 months. It was the same sort of circumstances, the same sort of structure. They took a month to recover the bodies. We took nearly 7 months. Everything about this investigation, everything about the recovery of the bodies, everything has fallen way, way, way short of where it needs to be. And, ultimately, my guess is at Grenfell, there will be prosecutions. At Didcot, there will probably be prosecutions. Who knows? But what about those investigating authorities? Surely, although their tardiness doesn't cost lives, surely they are every bit as culpable in terms of not doing their job properly as those that are involved in Didcot or at Grenfell. You expect the health and safety executive to police health and safety. They are not doing that. And going back to Jim's point, the very fact that they issue press releases proudly boasting about the fact that they have prosecuted a 78-year-old farmer for taking his grandchild for a spin in a tractor. HSE, if you're watching, get your head out your ass. Get your priorities right, because priorities are not 78-year-old farmers giving a treat to their grandchild. Your job is to go and find out what happened at Didcot. I mean, almost to the point where nothing else matters now. We already know that demolition construction is the single most deadly industry there is. The HSE itself reminds us of that very fact every single year. They publish a league table, they issue press releases denouncing the construction and demolition industry as being the worst perpetrators of accidents and fatalities in industry in Britain. You're every bit as culpable. You're complicit. Why are you not delivering findings? Let's have a look. Dan Cutler says, very true, Mick. How does it take this long to finalise the process and prosecution? There is no... Think about Grenfell for a moment, okay? So they've already cited the fact that the American manufacturer of the cladding was aware of its shortcomings and did nothing to prevent it being sold. They were the manufacturer of the foam insulation were also aware, and Kingspan, who installed it, were also aware. That's 3 smoking guns. What more do you need? If anybody's actually seen any of the TV coverage from yesterday, the report into Grenfell, we're not talking about like a book. We're talking about volumes, actual volumes. That investigation has laid out, all of the faults and the issues and everything else. Surely that should just be a case of take that report, hand it to the Crown Prosecution Service and say, do your best. Do your best. Take them to the cleaners. But no. We are now starting, presumably, another round of investigation. At which point, these various companies will bring in their lawyers, enormously expensive, and part of their job will be to delay the proceedings. They will put every obstacle in the way possible to ensure that investigation and that subsequent prosecution is as protracted as is humanly possible. And Didcot will be exactly the same. Exactly the same. Mick says, I've lost none of my mates while in the army. Each inquiry held into their deaths took no longer than 6 months. Now I'm waiting to hear why 4 of my friends were killed doing their job. The daily job after 8 years. It makes me fucking sick. It makes me fucking sick as well. And I wasn't friends with these guys. I said at the time, and I was speaking more specifically about the recovery of the bodies. 3 of the 4 guys at Didcot lay undiscovered and unrecovered for almost 7 months. Now, if they had been at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, if they'd been stranded on the moon or Mars or in the International Space Station, you'd think, yeah, well, not that easy, is it? This was in Didcot. It's a market town. It's got all of the things that a market town should have. It's got a railway line. It's got a pub. It's got... How on earth? I mean, literally to the point, and I realise, 20,000 tons of steel is a fair old mess to sort your way through. But this is not, where are the bodies? Oh, they're at the bottom of the ocean. We can't pinpoint them exactly. Where are the bodies? Well, they're over there. They're over there in that pile of steel. 7 months. And in so many ways, that set the tone for everything that's followed. I said this probably 2 days after. I was up there the day after the collapse. And at that time, I told Sky TV that I expected the investigation to last about 4 years. Shows how much I know. But I do remember... I remember thinking... I just remember thinking that this would be pushed under the carpet as much as humanly possible, because the health and safety executive literally threw a blanket over the entire site. My understanding, and I've had this from firsthand from people that were actually on the site. They were keen, literally after the collapse had happened, and there's steel tangled mess and everything else. There were people on those sites that were desperate to recover the bodies of their fallen colleagues, comrades, but they were permitted from doing so, perhaps rightly, because of the potential danger that still remained. There was half the boiler house was still upright in a weakened position, in a weakened state. So I fully understand that. But literally from hours after that boiler house came down, it became very, very clear to anybody that was watching that what the HSE was looking for was a prosecution. It wasn't a let's recover the bodies. It wasn't a let's give some closure to the families. It wasn't let's give the necessary lessons to the demolition industry to avoid this being repeated. It was, we are going to have a prosecution, a high profile one. And the families, the men, the demolition industry can all wait, because we have got a prosecution in mind. And so it goes on. So it goes on. I've said before, the HSE and many other public bodies are wildly underfunded. And now we've got a situation where effectively the HSE is basically self-financing. These fees for intervention and that kind of thing. All the time you've got that, what they're looking for is a big payday. I don't mean as individuals. I'm sure the HSE employs some very fine people who would love to do their job properly. But ultimately, what they are looking for is a big payday for the HSE. Having dragged their heels for 8.5 years, they now need to make sure that any prosecution results in multi millions of pounds in fines, so that they can justify their existence. And all of that has taken place at the expense of the 4 families and of the demolition industry as well. Dan Cullen says these people investigating and need to be held to account on the delay. Yeah, they do. I mean, I personally, and I realise that's not the focus, but surely after yesterday, it was. Excuse me, frog in my throat. the part of the, I'm just going to go back to say exactly what it was. The inquiry found that almost everyone involved in the refurbishment and maintenance of Grenfell Tower was at fault. Okay, that includes the investigating authorities. Now, I'm sure Sir Martin Moore-Bick, whoever the bleeding hell he is, I'm sure he's done a fine job, and I'm sure he's assembled a team of very, very clever, intelligent people. But 7 years? 7 years? And I'll make this point again, bearing in mind the public outrage that coincided with Grenfell, because I think most of us watched it on the TV. We watched it unfold. Didn't realise quite how big a deal it was at the time, but we watched it unfold. But Grenfell has been the subject of almost constant media attention and outrage, and they still managed to drag that out for 7 years. Didcot, apart from being mentioned in the House of Commons the day after the tragedy itself, with the exception, I think her name's Sarah Champion, I think she's an MP up in Rotherham or thereabouts. Apart from her raising her head above the parapet every once in a while, nobody said a word. Didcot is over there and it's forgotten. So what onus, what is requiring the Thames Valley Police and the HSE to pull their finger out? There's not. There's no pressure. No pressure whatsoever. I say again, the American system, they managed to resolve their similar incident in 18 months. My personal belief is they should have a cap. You've got 2 years to bring this all to fruition, after which you're paying. There will be a financial penalty against the police, against the investigating authorities, because you have failed in your job. And yes, if that means heads need to roll, police commissioners, heads of the HSE, so be it. Because they're not doing their job, let's face it. Why keep them on? Chris Ford says if they prosecuted the 78-year-old farmer as an example, it hasn't worked. I've still seen young children in the cabs of tractors, and it's probably the safest place for them. Think about it. Think about this. I only half touched on this when I was covering that last week. So 78-year-old farmer with one of his grandchildren in a cab. Now, those of you that are in the industry, construction, demolition, farming, agriculture, as Chris has rightly said there, a tractor cab has probably got full ROPS, FOPS protection. Yes, child probably wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Was the grandfather? Probably not. But you've got ROPS and FOPS that, these machines are built for ultimate stability and everything else. But also, who is more interested in the well-being of a child? A looky-loo next-door neighbour with a camera, the health and safety executive, or the grandfather of the child in the cab? 40 says people like sitting on their hands doing nothing. Sometimes they don't want to know. They just turn the other cheek. I'm not interested. They only want the money. Yeah, not interested at all. The whole construction industry is corrupt and has been for a long time. From the card system to the old guard, who are the top tier. I have to say, and it does genuinely pain me to say this. Demolition and construction has given me a good living for 30 plus years. But I'm at the point of despairing of the industry at the moment. 24 hours, less than 24 hours after the findings of the inquiry into the Grenfell Tower, laid bare the level of dishonesty and corruption and greed within the industry. My LinkedIn feed this morning is full of various organizations proclaiming that that we've got their next awards ceremony coming up, and where is your respect? Where is your class? Where is your intellect when you're doing things like that? When it came to Grenfell, everybody, Build UK, the Construction Leadership Council, every single Federation of Master Builders, all of these, every single construction organisation, be they contractors or trade bodies, should be filling their social media today with "This is a fucking disgrace and we are ashamed. We are ashamed." Even though we may not have been directly involved, we are ashamed because of our connection to the industry that allowed that to happen. And I will say the same again when Didcot finally resolves itself. Holding a minute or a 4-minute silence at every NFDC AGM means shit. It means fuck all. It's, go through the motions. Oh, Didcot. Oh, yeah. Minute silence. Right. Next award. Fuck them. Fuck them and fuck all they stand for, because it's an absolute disgrace. This is an industry, be it demolition or construction, it's an industry that is built upon the backs of working men and women. And allowing them to die is bad enough, but then doing nothing to resolve the situation that allowed them to die in the first place makes it worse. It makes it worse. Let me think. 2016. Since 2016, I reckon we've had 2, 4, 6, 8. Because of various machinations, there's every likelihood we've probably had 7 NFDC presidents since Didcot happened. Not one of them has stood up to be counted on that. We've got a situation coming up in however many days, weeks, months time, where the World Demolition Summit will be taking place over in Sweden. And the keynote speaker for that is Mark Coleman. Coleman and Company was the demolition company that was carrying out the demolition at Didcot when the tragedy unfolded. Now, as it stands today, we don't know. We don't know if Coleman were negligent or responsible. We don't know. But should he be doing the keynote speech, bearing in mind that there are still 4 grieving families grieving over the loss of 4 men that died on one of his sites? Regardless of his input, even if, and I pray that this is the case. I don't pray, but I pray this is the case. I would love nothing more than for the Thames Valley Police and the HSE to come back and say, we've thoroughly investigated Didcot. It was a tragic accident, but those responsible were not the demolition contractor. I would love that. I would celebrate that. But all the time there is a question mark. Is that appropriate for the main man at Coleman and Company, as was, to be the keynote speaker at a World Demolition Summit? Mick says, I think now the families of those at Grenfell have some sort of hope that they will get some sort of answer from the police. But how long have they got to wait? More heartache for another few years. If what was said yesterday, the police have to act now, not investigate what has already come out. Yeah. As I say, in order to stand up in front of the world's media and, in front of government as well, to be able to stand up and say that, what were the names of the companies? Arconic, Celotex, and Kingspan. They have actually been named as complicit, and they were involved in various ways in that. To be able to stand up and actually say that without being fearful of being prosecuted for libel or slander, you have to be 100, 200, 1000% certain of your facts. Those are facts. They're in black and white. Surely the police could just take that and say, okay, well, based on this, you, and possibly you as well, you're up before the beak. Simple as that. Gary Muirhead, belatedly, you've missed all the effing and blinding, Gary, which is probably just as well. Good of you to join us. And welcome back to Blighty. Jim Turner says, Jim Turner says, when I can get the damn thing to play. Like everything, it all boils down to money. Take the tower blocks. They've clad them to make them look shiny, new, cutting-edge modern buildings, and the installation probably could have done easier and cheaper from a spray-on method, but it still looked like an old, outdated block. So let's play make pretend, and we'll tart it up on the cheap, so the skyline looks new and wealthy. Yeah, and just on that subject, new and wealthy, if you know that part of London, you know, this was a tower block. You know, you've all seen the images. You know, there were lots of, you know, pretty poor people there. You know, lots of immigrant people living there. But it's surrounded on all four sides by very, very, very sexy, very, very, very expensive properties. It's an expensive part of London. So rather than doing what they need to do, let's tart it up because it's kind of blotting the skyline a little. You know, let's just make it look a bit nicer. Never mind the safety implications. Never mind the living conditions or the dying conditions of the people living there. Let's just tart it up. Yeah. Mick says, Mark, I stopped writing the book I was doing on advisement from a solicitor of the people who was going to publish it. Excuse me. I put some things to paper and was told, you realise that you will open the biggest can of worms ever in the demolition trade. I spoke to a few people and they said, you do this and you'll lose friends and people you know, if not worse. So I shelved the manuscript, but I'm now thinking sod it and sod the consequences. It's a tough one. Tough one. Found that with the CMA, and I realise the CMA, you know, in the grand scheme of things, much less serious than what we've been talking about with Didcot and Grenfell. But some of the people that were found to be complicit and involved in the CMA investigation were people that I hold in very, very high regard. Not all of them, but some of them. You know, they're people that I have respect for, you know, I admire. And then when you see that, and the problem is, I mean, I'm fairly sure our friend Mickey's, I'm fairly sure he mentioned yesterday, he's 74 years old. He's had his health issues as well. You don't want to cut yourself off from lifelong friends, just to make a point. But that point needs to be made. I can't advise you on that, Mick. I really can't. It just, all I would say is if you've got your facts straight and you're not in danger of being sued for libel or slander, you know, there's not a great deal they can do. And Jim Turner says, get it published, Mick. Friends like that are worth losing. It is hard. It is hard. As I say, going back to the CMA thing, I mean, I no longer get myself invited to NFTC and IDE functions and what have you. But even if I was, I mean, I don't actually believe either of those organisations to be particularly relevant these days anyway. But I find it quite hard to go along and take part, knowing full well that those 8-9 people over there are all proven to be corrupt. That one over there has had a fatality on one of their sites. That one over there, he's had 2 fatalities on his site. That one over there has had 4 fatalities on their site. I'd find that impossible, frankly. It's a problem I'll never have to overcome because, as I say, they don't invite me. Because, you know, the one thing I would say is, and I'll put my hand up and I'll admit this. I went to the opening of the new NFDC headquarters over in Hemel Hempstead when they moved, whatever it was, about a year ago. And one of the guys that was in attendance was pretty high-ranking guy. I can't remember the fella's name, but pretty high-ranking guy from the health and safety executive. And we were introduced, and he said, "Oh yes, I'm well aware of you, Mark. You know, you constantly having a go at the HSE." And I didn't say what I should have said, which was, your organisation is a disaster, a disgrace. You should be personally ashamed. The very fact that you've actually chosen to turn up here, knowing that Didcot is still ongoing, I think you're a disgrace. But I didn't. I was way more polite than I should have been, way more polite than he deserved. So if I should ever find myself in that situation again, it won't be the same. It caught me unawares. Let's put it like that. I don't normally mind my P's and Q's too much, but he caught me unawares, and it was only after literally driving back from Hemel Hempstead thought you should have pulled him, and I didn't, and I apologise for that. So yes, that's that. I can tell you, for those of you that don't know, Mystery Machine was indeed Yanmar, and Dan Cullen has got that. He's now got 6 points on the board, and Excavator World Cup was won by Cabelco, or at least this round was won by Cabelco. They are in the next round alongside Volvo. Tomorrow's match, just a couple of little companies that you've probably heard of. Caterpillar versus Komatsu. To be honest, if the draw had worked out differently, I would have expected that to be the grand final. It wasn't. Gary Muirhead, I'm sure Hydromech will be delighted to hear this. You are the only you're the only person that voted for Hydromech. Quite possibly because you've got a friend in the business. Mick says, good show, mate, but where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? I wish I knew. Let's just park Grenfell and park Didcot for a second. In a couple of less than 2 weeks' time, it'll be the 5th anniversary of the incident up at Redcar, in which 2 guys were, let's make no bones about it, they were burned alive on a demolition job. Probably the worst possible way to go. 5 years later, we're still waiting. I'm in fairly regular contact with the widow of one of those guys, Anne Mackay. She's asked me the same question. But what do I do? Who do I speak to? What? And I mean, she's done well fairly recently because Private Eye picked up on her story. I've got a friend in the video business who I think is planning to do something to mark the 5th anniversary as well. But the HSE are not helping. The police up in the northeast aren't helping. The NFDC aren't helping. Mick, I don't know the answer to that question. And bearing in mind, over the course of, let's switch back to Didcot, over the course of 8.5 years, I've written to local mayors, I've written to MPs, I've written to the Home Secretary. Now, I realise I'm a voice in the wilderness, but I've made no difference whatsoever. I've made no impact whatsoever. I don't believe that I or anyone else has moved us closer to a resolution. So in answer to your question, I honestly don't know. I mean, I would love to suggest that the demolition industry, or the working men and women, those with dirt under their fingernails, those that are actually, that spend their time on site, not those within the office, but those on site, I would propose a down tools to mark the 9th anniversary. Will they? Probably not. Chris Ford says, I know where I'm going. Back to the seat in the digger, dig deep, cast wide, and rattle the hammer. Yeah, good man. Mick says, right, that hound needs to cock his legs. Stay safe, people. Let's all try and forget the woes of the world. Give your kids or wives a big hug when you walk through the door tonight. Close the door and switch off. Catch you tomorrow. Yeah, I'll be back. And Gary Muirhead sums it all up. It's like David and Goliath trying to take on some of these big companies. Yeah. Yeah, and all the while, those companies that were involved in Didcot, those companies that were involved at Grenfell, those companies that were involved at Redcar, continue to work, continue to turn a buck, continue to win awards, continue to be granted keynote speaker status, continue regardless. And on that note, go and have a fab day. I'll see you tomorrow.